Hello again. This is going to be the second part and the last part of Gesta Hungarorum, the analysis of the book that I read. Okay, so let's start. So the second part starts with some religious explanations where the ancient Hungarians traced their roots back to certain beliefs. And according to Christianity, the early Christianity, the early Hungarians traced their root back to Magog. So Magog was the Magyar tribe. So it is under a footnote that this is given. So I thought that Magog, Moger is the same. So this explanation could be referred to Magog, the Magyars. Yes, and I even thought that Gogs could be the Turks, or maybe the Goths. I don't know. For some reason, the Gogs and Magogs. So Gog could be Turks, and Magog could be the Magyars, the Huns, the Hungarians, as we are related. So it is talking about the Scythian land, and the Scythian land was very wide. It comprised of very wide areas within the world. So starting from Pannonia, going over to the east of Asia, and also to Iran, even parts of Anatolia and the Caucasus, and parts of Africa. So the Huns were the Magyars. So according to the book, it's been said that the Huns spoke a close language to the Thuringian and the Saxon language. So that makes me think of actually German, but did the Huns speak German? It is nothing like that mentioned in the book, but it was close to the Saxony and close to the Thuringian language. But which language did they speak those times? That is uncertain. In the book, the Alans are described, the Hunors and the Magyars. So the Hunors and the Magyars, they were two brothers, it's been said. And all the Hungarians, they trace back their ancestry to the Hunors and Magyars. And now to the Scythian land. The Alps are mentioned here, and Prussia. I think that part is today's Poland and parts of Russia, I think. And also we have Eastern Europe as their land, the Scythian land. And also some parts of Northern Europe are mentioned here. And from there towards the mountains in the Urals. And from there, from the east of Europe, towards Asia, towards Central Asia and Eastern Asia. And then from there, the Caucasus, Georgia, was also part of Scythia, Tarsia, of course, as we said, East Asia and Mongolia, which was part of the Scythian Empire, and it ended in Europe, the Scythian land. So it also comprised parts of Iran, Afghanistan, Inner Asia, and also parts of India. I know from some sources that the Scythians also invaded India at some time, so in the past. And because of this, there is lots of impacts from the Scythian culture in India. So when you compare, for example, Turkish culture, we see lots of similarities, or say some similarities between the Indians, the Pakistani, and those areas with the Turkish people. I see Scythian effect here. That is definitely Scythian effect. It also mentions the Cumans and the Pechenegs in Gesta Hungarorum. And these ancient Turkic tribes, or the ancient Turkish tribes, they were neighbors with the Hungarians. I mean, with the Scythians. So these Scythian lands in the past, they had lots of forests, lots of green areas, and wildlife. And Scythian tents are described as being gold woven. There were lots of golden decorated parts in the tent. So Attila is being described here, and they say that he was very generous from the sources, very open. So Attila's family is being described here. He was from the Shemini family. He had several brothers who were also leaders of certain parts of the region. One of his brothers' name was Bela. So, as I said, Attila had several brothers, each of whom was dominant in one region and responsible for one region in Europe. And Attila was responsible for the Central European region. That means he took places like Germany and France. He went until Strasbourg and Toulouse. Also, Taxony is mentioned here. And Taxony is the grandson of ARPAD. And the father of Geza. And in one of the footnotes, it is talking about the Khanates of the Scythians. So when I looked at the footnotes, I realized that some words look really familiar with Turkish. For example, Törtele or Adale, which I think might be the root for Adalet, justice. And I presume that Scythian consisted of both Hungarian, Old Hungarian, and Old Turkish words. I told you before that one of the punishments in Scythia, in ancient Scythia, was to slice human into two. So this habit must have been stemming from the Roman Empire. They took it from the Roman Empire. And as I mentioned before, there were 108 clans, families, existing in the Scythian Empire. And out of these, there were thousands of soldiers. So they collected thousands of soldiers. So they left certain soldiers in Pannonia and educated the people and the soldiers in order to take certain places in Europe. And here it is mentioned in Gesta Hungarorum that the soldiers passed through the lands of the Pechenegs and the White Cumans, that is the Turkish tribes. And in one part of the book, it talks about the region where they invaded, let's say, Central Europe and parts of Europe until France, with their tents, of course, and with their families and wives. And then they think, well, we should not go beyond this part because we left some of the family, some of the wives in Pannonia at home. And some of them think we should turn back. So they had a restricted area of conquer because they had families to follow. And some of the families, they stayed in Pannonia. So there are certain parts of the Scythians that take actually, that they took into their lands parts of Europe. Of course, because the Scythians, the Huns, were conquering parts of Europe. Of course, they gained enemies, and one of their enemies was Dietrich. He was German, and they actually started to get an opposing power to strike back the Huns, the Scythians, so that the Scythians would be defeated. So they were the Germans. And also Italians joined the Germans to counterattack the Huns, the Scythians. And of course, war started with Germany and Italy then. I mean, with the Italians and with some German tribes. So the Huns had to fight with them. So it describes here how the Huns killed Germans and Italians here. So when they confronted the Germans and the Italians in the battle, there were both losses for the Huns and for the Germans, for Dietrich's army. So Attila died. He was killed in the battle, and according to Scythian burials, he was buried. And because I mentioned now the burials and the tradition of Scythian burial style, it reminded me of the Kurgans. So the Kurgans were the Scythian burial styles, and I have recently read and heard that there were thousands of Kurgans found in Hungary, and on purpose, some of the burial mounds they wouldn't open, or they wouldn't want to open these burial mounds in order not to get the Hungarians learn the truth about their past. So they want to conceal the past and hide the past instead of revealing it. So there must be a certain slyness to it. I mean, who would profit from this, or who would benefit from this? Everyone, every nation has the right to learn about their past, the real past. Attila didn't die. I mean, the leaders of the Scythians and the Huns, they were buried according to the Scythian style, the kurgan. After these certain leaders, the military Scythian leaders were killed in the battles, then Attila came onto power. So sorry about that. So, and here the arrival of Attila is being described, how he came, how he became king. So he was the terror of the world. It's being described. Gesta Hungarorum describes Attila as dark-skinned. I mean, not fair-skinned, but with a dark complexion, and he had dark and fierce eyes. That's what they say about him, and he looked madly. When he looked madly. I don't know what kind of beard the Scythians would wear, but he had a Scythian-style beard, long hair, and his tent was neat and clean, and his clothing as well, very neat and clean. And the tents were decorated with gold. So this was the richness of the tribe and the tents. And Attila's horses were described as being from various nations around the world, where he got those horses. He was almost extravagant, very generous, and he had a kind heart. Even his bed was decorated in gold. And in the footnotes, it is talking about the turul bird that Attila had. A turul is a kind of bird in Turkish, and it is the same bird in Attila that Attila had. So definitely the kind of language that Scythians spoke was Proto-Turkish, because all the names are Turkish. The names of the birds, the names of the kings, certain common vocabulary, they must have spoken a Proto-Uralic and a Proto-Altaic language that is Proto-Turkish and Proto-Hungarian mixed, most probably. So this kind of turul bird was on his crown that he wore. And the book also says that the style that Attila wore his clothing resembled the Medes. So Attila also conquered parts of Germany and France. So he reached even the river Rhine, Strasbourg, parts of Rhine. And there he divided his army by ordering certain officers to go here and there and to occupy this and this land. They even went until Spain. So I wonder why parts of Spain speak Basque. Could this be because the Scythians went until Spain and one part of Spain speaks Basque? Because I heard that Basque, the structure of Basque has nothing to do with Spanish. It is an agglutinative language. So could this be the remnants of the Scythians? And Attila and his army, they even went until Seville. And there was an Arab prince ruling over Seville, Spain, and the Hungarian army reached 330,000 soldiers at that time. And of course, the war lasted years. It took a long time. And Spain was called Ispan. This was because the Hungarians called Spain Ispan. We also call Spain Hispania in Turkish. So that I'm sure it has a common name. It derives from that name. So they take Toulouse, the parts of Rhine, Köln in Germany, and there was a queen in a certain part of Germany. I think she was ruling over Köln, and there it has been said that the Scythians killed 11,000 virgins. And in Eidenach, the Scythians sent their armies to Northern Europe. That means Scandinavia. Denmark, Norway, and they sent their troops to Prussia and Friesen, a part of, I think, Germany it was, also Poland. And they took all these areas, all these lands. Ursula was, by the way, the daughter of the queen in Köln. The daughter of the king in Köln, I'm sorry. And also Latvia was taken. And in Sacambria, Attila got his brother killed. And the Germans, they called Budapest Etzelburg. The main reason why Attila got his brother killed was because the part of Budapest was still called Buda and not his name. That was one of the reasons why he got his brother killed. Because Budapest wasn't named after him, but after his brother. And I remember from sources that in the ISIS war in Syria, certain scriptures were found which were dated back to Attila's times. That is the runic stones, parts of runic stones and tablets. And they were from this era, from Attila's era. That's what I think. And Attila, he sliced, of course, the traitors who didn't work for him. Attila went on taking over Italian states and Italian cities, and even Monte Cassino. I remember going to Monte Cassino in 2006. They took us there, but I never knew why they did that. Now I realize that actually I went to these places all over, wherever the Scythians were placed were wherever they put their feet. So if you start with Bavaria, the Avars. I went to Hungary. I know I went through Italy. I went to Monte Cassino. I went to France, but I didn't go to the places that Attila went. Of course, I didn't go to Köln yet. And some parts of Italy, of course. But yeah, I mean, some regions that the Hungarians roamed, I passed through. Yes, Budapest. I went to Budapest twice. Now, in one part of the book, it talks about the king, the Pope, that the king went to, or he begged Attila and in one part it talks about Attila robbing the rich and giving it to the poor, most probably. So actually he was a kind of Robin Hood then, we can say, because he threatened the Pope to kill his family with his army. And actually Attila had plans to take over Egypt and Syria and the Mideast and parts of Anatolia, most probably. It says in the story, in the book, that the Bactrians brought the daughter of the Pope near Attila. And after having spent a long night with her, he was noticed to have blood running through his nose because he had drunk too much, and he suffocated of his own blood, it says in the book. So this is a kind of legend that goes through stories. People tell each other these kinds of stories, that he died in that way. So the daughter of the king started screaming, etc., and tried to wake him up. So Attila's death both caused pain, and joy at the same time, because he had many foes and he had many friends. So after Attila's death, the Scythian land was divided into 3 according to his sons. I mean, all 3 of his sons took some parts and ruled over them, and all his sons were married with foreign women. This reminds me of the Ottomans. And the Seljuks. The Seljuks and the Ottomans, they did the same. They had the same strategy. In order to gain land, or in order to control the lands, they married with foreign women, with non-Turkic women, or with non-Hunnic, with non-Scythian women. So you see that the habit, the tradition continues. It goes on for centuries, for thousands of years, actually. So it is the same. I mean, how can people say that Scythians were not Turks? It is woven in the traditions. Blood brotherhood. These kinds of traditions you can all see them in the Turkish history. So the world must accept that the Scythians are proto-Turks. There is also a tribe called Şekeli. So the Şekelis are actually the descendants of the Magyars, of the Hungarians. So these people, they turned back to Pannonia after his death, after Attila's death. So the Huns were able to destroy their enemies when they went back to Pannonia, and when they saw their land had been occupied, they sliced all their foes. So the Scythians laid their tents to the place where ARPAD lived. So after they turned back to Pannonia, they passed through a river which was called Un. So according to that Un river, it's been said that Hungary, Ungarn got its name, because in some sources the place is Ungarn. And in a place called Svatokluk, well, this is a typical Turkish name. When something ends with luk, ek, definitely know that it's Turkish or Turkish origin. So in this place, the tribe was divided into 7. So 7 is the number of the Turkish tribes. This is not what I found out. This is not what I made up. Sorry. This is what it says in the footnote. So 7 tribes, 7 Turkish tribes. And because of this, when they went back to Pannonia, the Scythians had 7 Turkish tribes. So the people pass Pest, they pass the river, they pass Buda, they pass Pest. And there are certain legends about Arpad and his sons and how they conquered the lands. And there was also a Turul tribe among the clans, among the Turkish clans. Okay. Now, Arpad and his family had its place in the Alps, in the Alp mountains. So I sometimes think that the Turkish people, the ancestors of the Turks, gave the name Alp to the Alp mountains. So the Alps are actually founded by the Turks. And Arpad had his place in that area with his family, with his clan. So they took those lands near the river Ung. And Arpad brought his tents to his city, to Shekesh Fehervar. So this was the place where Arpad first settled down. And also the region of Transylvania was a Scythian land. So Transylvania was the main region where the Scythians lived. So if you go back to the bird, the Turul bird was said to bring luck, a very sacred symbol of the Turks and of the Scythians. So the Scythians or let's say the Hungarians, the Huns, they also settled in Bohemia. I think that's Böhmen, a part of Austria today, which was, of course, part of Hungary before the Second World War. It was actually before the First World War. So one of the families, one of the clans, which was in the Scythian lands, was called Shak. So this makes me think of Saka, the Saka Scythians, the Saka Turks. So why would they call themselves Shak? By the way, this reminded me of one of my relatives whose surname is Sak. And I'm beginning to think that these common words are rooted. We are the ancient Scythians. So it all describes the tribes here. There were 7 tribes in the Scythian lands, and one of them was the Shak. And there are other tribes mentioned, of course, one by one in Gesta Hungarorum. And one of the clans, one of the families was Urs, which is also a Turkish name. Very interestingly, another family clan was named Künd. Now, I had a classmate at university, and her surname was Kund. So this makes me think of if Künd and Kund are actually related, because if Shak and Sak are related, Künd and Gund are also related too. And maybe Günther is also related. I mean, the name Günther. Why not? I mean, because language gives itself away when they are related. So this is the main reason why globalization is being actually thrived at. If you kill the languages that prove to be relatives of these ancient civilizations, of this rich culture, then of course it would be easier to rule over these people, these ancient noble people. And also another family was called Kaploni. So Kaploni resembles Kaplan, which means tiger in Turkish. So one thing that we must do in order to prove that we are the ancestors of the Scythians, we must protect first Hungarian, second Turkish. These are the 2 languages that we must protect, because if we cannot protect this culture or these cultures, we will be lost. And our history will be lost. And then Scythian will go to the Indo-Europeans, and we won't be able to prove anything. There is so much proof that Scythians are not Indo-European, that Scythians are not Indo-Iranian. So the 6th family, the 6th tribe, placed itself, settled down in the area of Bohemia in Austria today. Yes. Now, there, the rich church, I mean, not the rich church, but the church had lots of treasures. And much gold, and the king and the church and the pope, they were actually robbing the people. And what the Hungarians did was that they took the treasures from the church and the pope and actually delivered it to the poor, delivered it to the people. So that this makes me think of Robin Hood. So Robin Hood is actually a figure that stole from the rich and gave it to the poor, like the ancient Hungarians did. So the Hungarian leaders, they had very strange names, which really can be traced back to Turkish. So they resemble Turkish words. There was, for example, one Almos, which resembles Alma or Elma, which means apple in Turkish. So another name is Zobart. It might not make sense, but it sounds Turkish or Persian. And most of the leaders of the Hungarians, they are actually buried in the ruins of Esztergom. So Esztergom is actually a castle where most of the Scythian leaders were buried. I went to Esztergom as well. They took us there. They took us there. It makes me very happy to think that I traveled those places. This is coincidence. I mean, this is coincidence. So there was a Hungarian ruler called Verbupsu, and Verbupsu his tribe and the soldiers were killed by the Germans, by the German army. And he wanted to take revenge, and so he fought against the Germans. So this person, this Hungarian king, ruler, took revenge from the Germans. He killed them, barbecued their flesh, ate it. Oh, I'm so sorry, I have to say this. And drank their blood. I'm so sorry, I have to say this. So actually this is barbaric, yes. But in those times, it was quite normal to do so. You had to do this in order to win the war. And I'm sure all soldiers, all human beings did this in order to survive. So the Hungarians, they were able to take Bohemia and parts of Austria into their land. So actually, when they were trying to take over Bohemia and parts of Austria, there were really bloody fights going on with the Germans and with the Hungarians. So both parties had severe losses, and the Hungarians had to turn back to Pannonia. So there was somebody called Conrad, and he couldn't actually accept that the Germans were defeated. So he tried to take revenge from the Hungarians and went until Hungary with his troops. So actually, when you look at Gesta Hungarorum, it talks about how the Hungarians took over the church and the rich kings and castles and took their treasures from them, because they wanted to deliver it to their own people, to the people who deserved it, and most probably who were starving, most probably. Something like a Robin Hood kind of thing. So the Hungarians, they went over to Thüringen, Sachsen, Rhine, Main, those places all over Germany. And even they went over to East France. They went until Burgundy. So also Germany, parts of Germany, especially Regensburg and Schwarzenburg, they occupied these places. They took from the church, they took the treasures from the church, and they gave it to the poor. So in Ulm, there was also a Hunnic occupation, but the German fighters, they defeated the Huns there, and they killed their leader. So it was a defeat for the Huns, actually, in Ulm. So the Huns, they took revenge, and they killed all the German soldiers that they had kept and their families. So they were about 20,000 in number, the people who were killed, the 20,000 German prisoners and their families. So we can see that in the past there were lots of fights going between the Germans and the Huns. Well, I'd like to confess actually that when I made a research on Hungarian DNA, some Hungarians, they are so proud that they have German DNA in their blood. And I have to say that in the past, this actually was a bloody war. And we will see in the future of the book and of the era, of the Hunnic era between Germany, how the Germans actually integrated into the Huns and became part of the Hunnic families, of the Hungarian families and of the Hungarian nobles. So this was definitely not a peaceful integration into the Huns. So if you talk about German blood, if you talk about German DNA in Hungarians, this definitely doesn't mean that the Hungarians were always German. They had definitely assimilated into the Germans. They had been assimilated into the Germans by force. Yes, because they had been defeated by the Germans, the Hungarians, and because some of their leaders were killed in German lands, the Hungarians, they thought they would not try to conquer Germany again for at least 5 years, because there was such loss of the Hungarians. And then they thought to take over Bulgaria and Bulgarian land. So the Hungarians actually went until Edirne, Adrianopolis, and from there they went to Constantinople, today Istanbul. Okay, now when the Hungarians came to Constantinople, Istanbul, they camped near the castles of Istanbul, the Rumeli Castle most probably, or the Anatolian Castle. And there, in Istanbul, the Huns made, most probably it was oil wrestling or some kind of oil wrestling with a Greek soldier. So Greece sent a soldier to Anatolia to fight the Hungarian. So actually, if we have oil wrestling in Turkey, it is not because of Greece, it is because of the Scythians. So in this fight with the Greek breaks his arm. That means the Hungarian wins over the Greek. So now there is a legend, a Hungarian legend, that they won the Greek over wrestling. So I said they came to Constantinople. So that means the Hungarians, they took over Constantinople. They tried to take over Constantinople. And as a leader, in those times, they had Taxony. So Taxony was a Hungarian leader. Now, this makes me think of Saxon. Saxon, Taxony, Anglo-Saxons, makes me think of Hungarian descendants. It could have mixed with the Hungarians, those places, or those places might have taken this name from Hungary. That's what I think now. Because T and S, I know they change from a language point of view. So why not Taxony? And Taxony was named after him and changed to Saxon or Saxony. So after taking Constantinople, the Hungarians, they take Greece, and from there they take Bulgaria. So that means they take the gold too, the gold of the churches, the gold of the kings, because they did not deserve it. The church didn't deserve to have the gold. Okay, after they conquered these lands, they went back to Pannonia. And there they had their pagan, their Tengriist rituals. So they believed in Tengri. They had a Tengriist belief. They weren't Christians yet. And this was their last, let's say, joy before they became Christians. And after this, everything changed as a belief for the Hungarians. So the church and the kings actually see the threats of the Hungarians and the robbery of the Hungarians until the period of Gesta. So here it talks about Stefan, the first Hungarian king who became Christian. It was around the year 900. And they also talk about Ladislas here. So Stefan, when he became Christian and when the Hungarians became Christians around the year 1000, they were actually Christianized by force. So it was not in their own will that they accepted this religion. Because it says that they accepted the religion with obeying. That means the others didn't obey, and because they didn't obey, they were killed. So, and now the Hungarians obeyed, so they became Christians. So obedience was actually a force, or obedience. So after becoming Christians, the Hungarians warred against the Bulgars and the Slavs. And there is, under one footnote, the name of Botont. Botont is a Turkish name, it says, and it would mean to defend. So that's very interesting, because the root of the word is also found in Hungarian and in the Pechenegs. So they have a common word, the Turks, the Hungarians, and in those times the Pechenegs, because, Pechenegs are also Turks. I never heard that word, Botont. I wonder how many old Turkish words there are that we don't know. So there is a woman called Gisela, and Gisela takes revenge from the Hungarians, actually, by torturing one of the relatives of Stefan, and going back to Böhmen again, or Bohemia. So Stefan calls 3 of his relatives. I think they were Ladislas' sons, and he sends them to Bohemia to get revenge. Yes, Saint Stephen dies, and he is buried again in that famous place. And all the Hungarians, they mourn about their king because he died. And the Hungarians mourn for 3 years. They have their own rituals, their own mourning rituals, and they mourn for 3 years in their pagan tradition as Tengrists. And most probably Gisela had power, and she made it like that Peter, a new leader, was brought as a king for the Hungarians to rule. And Peter was Venetian. So she actually brought Peter as a leader because she thought that the German prisoners would be released if he would be the ruler of Hungary, of the Hungarians, of the Huns. So this Peter took the rights of all the Hungarians and gave it to the Germans. I mean, he discriminated the Hungarians. So Peter had an insatiable soul. He wanted everything. He took the Hungarian lands, and he was a despot. And all the treasures that the Hungarians had were given to the Latinos and the Germans. So this Peter, he also took over the rights of the women, the Hungarian women, and he tortured them, he mistreated them, and did lots of wrongs. So the peasants and the citizens were actually not very happy about this, and they went to the king and they complained about it. And the king gave this answer. He said, I'm going to replace the Hungarians with the Germans and the Latinos. That's what I'm going to do. And he also added that he would send immigrants to Hungary. And he also said that he would give Hungary to the Germans. And whatever you gained, I will give to the Germans. That's what he said. So all the nobles in Hungary, they come together and they fight against Peter. And they make a kurultai where they decide on a new leader instead of Peter. So the crowd, the Hungarian crowd, wants actually Abba to rule as a new king, as a new leader. And Peter goes back to Germany. He doesn't stay in Hungary. So the Hungarians wanted to get revenge from Peter and his people. So they took revenge from him. Of course, Peter wanted to fight back, and he also had his own plans. And on hearing that, the Hungarian army marched to Germany. So this meant another war with Germany, and the German princes were taken prison. And there was a group of Hungarians who wanted Peter to come back, and some of the Hungarians didn't want Abba to rule. So the Hungarians started to have an upheaval within their own community. So it was actually believed that Abba was not very honest and he deceived his people. So there was a certain chaos and turmoil going on, and some intricacies. So as a result of this turmoil, the emperor made the good king flee, and he gave way for the bad king to rule. So Peter was again leading over his people, leading over the Hungarians. Why did they want Abba to go away or to leave the post? Because Abba actually was defending the Hungarians, but the Venetians and the Germans, they didn't want this. So that means actually that within the Hungarians, the Germans and the Venetians and the Latinos had increased. So they didn't want their prestige or their comfort in a way harm or be harmed. That's why they wanted Peter back. The death of Abba is very interesting. It's been said, according to a legend, that the people killed him, they drowned him, and they threw him into the river. he was buried, and years later, when they took up his burial, when they opened his coffin again, he was healed. So that's a kind of legend. So this reminds me of certain religious stories. Very interesting. Very strangely, we have the story of Jesus Christ here. Actually, well, it just made me think of Jesus Christ. So you have some legendary names here, like Robin Hood, Jesus Christ, and also other legends. They were also taken up by the religions, the three big religions. Especially when you take the Old Norse legends. So of course, the majority of the Hungarians and the real Hungarians, the noble Hungarians, they were against Peter and they wanted him to come down. So they thought if the bold Ladislas and one of his sons would take over the throne and lead over the Hungarians. So Ladislas had two sons, Andrew and Levent, and they didn't want to mix with other tribes, and so they found it a bit strange that Bela was going to marry the daughter of the Polish king. So the two sons, Levent and I think one of the sons' name was Bela. The two sons, they go to the Cumans, the Turks, and they want help from them. So the Cumans, they promise the Hungarians to help them. So Peter is ruling more cruelly over the Hungarians. He discriminates them. He is ruling badly over them. So the three sons come together from bold Ladislas, and they try to find a solution. And they decide to meet up at Pest. Actually, what the Hungarians do, or the Hungarian army does, is they kill the Latinos and the Germans who treated them badly and who were the reason of the discrimination. So they got so furious that they killed children, wives, popes. But Peter escapes and runs away. He cannot be killed. And in Székesfehérvár, they catch him. Actually, they cannot capture him, but he falls sick and he dies. So upon a decision, the biggest of the sons rules over Hungary, Andrew, and he rules over Czechia, and he also rules over Austria, and of course Hungary. And he also rules over Poland. And actually, these wars last for about 3 years. And the emperor, Henry, declines in power. And this is a good opportunity for the Hungarians to take the power and rule over the vast majority of the places. So Andrew rules for about 15 years, and then there is Solomon, who rules over Hungary. And so the rulers change. And then comes Bela. So Bela wants to rule, and during the time of Bela, the Hungarians are neither Christian nor Tengrists or shamans, pagans. They believe in God, but they are something like in between. Bela ruled for about 2 years, and he has also been said to have had a dark complexion and to be bald. So after having a dispute over certain regions, the brothers and Solomon, David, and certain other rulers, they fell into dispute, and they tried to divide the country, not the country, but the regions, into certain parts in order to rule. But they fell into dispute, and the regions, they were not ruled very well. So during this period, there were also wars with the Germans, with the Slavs, and with certain other regions which had been fought against. So the Czechs and the Austrians, they were also defeated. So there was another fight taking place in the area of Bohemia. Both the Hungarians and the Germans lost many men, but in the end, the Germans and the Austrians, they lost the war. So Suleiman actually, Solomon actually became weaker, and because he became weaker, he wanted help from the emperor. And the Hungarians also fought against the Pechenegs. The Pechenegs lost the war. So Ladislas dies, his son dies, and then Colomon rules over the Hungarians. So Solomon's wife was very generous, and after she learned the death of her husband, she gave away all her treasures that she had to the poor, and delivered them among the Hungarians before she died. And after Solomon's death, Gesta ruled for 3 years. So what I found very interesting here is that very frequently Hungarian rulers died, and they had to change positions. So 2 years ruling, another ruler comes. 3 years ruling, another ruler comes. When you compare them with the first rulers, they actually ruled for decades, and now for only several years. So there is much difference. So Ladislas changed this tradition. Ladislas ruled for 30 years, so that's something. So the Pechenegs were seen as Hungarians' enemies, and they warred against the Hungarians, and the Hungarians saw them as their enemies, and they fought with them for years. So the Hungarians fought with the Pechenegs in Transylvania, and sometimes they won the war, and sometimes they lost the war, and it went on and forth. So in the end, the Pechenegs lost, it says. And also Colomon ruled for about 18 years. That's also a long time. So Colomon made the attempt to get Peter killed. So this was something. So after this, Colomon was able to conquer some places like Venice. And after Colomon, there was Bela. He ruled for over 9 years. And after that came Gesa. Gesa ruled for about 20 years. And in Shekes-Feher, the place which was mentioned before, where most of the kings, most of the Hungarian rulers are buried. So that's one fact. So that's what I wanted to add here. And after Gesa, there was again Stefan, and he ruled for about 11 years. So there were also several mixed Huns who ruled over Hungary, like a Hun that mixed with the Greeks, and his name was Bela. And then came his son Emmerich. So very interestingly, after him, there followed Andrew. Andrew went to Israel, where he became a Christian. So the Hungarians, they tried to take over Babylon. They fought against the Assyrians, and they took their lands. The Hungarians took over Assyrian land. That means our ancestors, the Turks. So if this place is the Assyrians, and if the Huns took over the Assyrians, it is then very clear that the ruins that were found there were actually from these times. Yes, yes. And there is actually a Turkish writing on that rune, which is mentioning Attila on the rune. I'm not sure what it meant, but I might place it as a title under my video, under my audio video, if I find what it says, and with the Turkish inscription. And some Hungarian rulers and leaders, they are buried in Esztergom. So there was a kind of period where the Mongols invaded Hungary. I mean the Hungarian land, which was under the rule of Andrew. So the Mongols or the Mongolians had a very strong army, about 500,000 with plus 40,000 soldiers altogether. So that was about 600,000, most probably. So at the same time, the Hungarians had to fight with the Austrians in Neustadt, and they were defeated. And after that, his son Bela came into power. But at the era of Stefan, the Hungarians, they fought bravely against the Austrian forces. So it was actually a success over the Austrians that they showed. So after his death, the third Ladislas came into power. The Hungarians, they got help from the Bulgarians. Yes, after some time, Habsburg was ruling over Hungary. That means a part of Austria. So they started to rule over Hungary from there. Yes, you see how Hungary actually got into the hands of non-Hungarians. So actually, at the period of the time when Hungarians took over Bohemia and parts of Germany, Austria, etc., the Germans wanted, or the Germans, they begged to get help from the Hungarians. Most probably they didn't want to get defeated, and for this they wanted to make a kind of alliance with the Huns. So they wanted to come to an agreement in order not to lose more land. And for this they tried to become allies. And with this, the nobility of the Huns actually got into danger, and the noble Huns, they mixed with the Austrians and the Germans. So Ladislas actually agreed on this agreement, and according to this agreement, the Germans had to fight with the Hungarians to defend their land. But the Germans, they didn't keep their word, and when they had to fight, they didn't. When they had to defeat the land, they didn't. So the Hungarian leaders realized this, and they killed the German leaders. And the soldiers of the Germans and the unions, the military union was destroyed, and so the Germans were defeated again. So this was at the Ladislav period. So how did Ladislas actually win this war? He came together with the Poles and the Cumans, and together with the Hungarians, they fought against the Germans and the Austrians and the traitors. So when it comes to the roots and the origin of the Hungarians, they were 7 tribes, 7 Turkish tribes, and one tribe of them was the Turul tribe, the noble tribe, which also comprised Gesa's family. So there are also some families, some noble families from Germans, like the Pabocha family, who integrated into the Hungarians. So if you look at the name Pabocha, Pabocha actually is very close to pabuç. Pabuç means a kind of shoe in Turkish. So when you have a look, or when you listen to the language, you will see some German roots having their ancestry maybe in Turkish ancestry, or in Turkic ancestry. Most probably they came from Siberia to Germany. That's what I think. And they had, of course, common language, which they took to Hungary. Otherwise, I cannot answer this question, because pabuç is a kind of shoe that you wear in Turkish, and I think it's also it also means shoe in Russian. So we have a common word. We most probably have a common ancestry sometime in Siberia with Russia, where the ancient Germans took them into Germany, and from Germany they took them to Hungary and mixed with the Hungarians there. So later there was another mixture with the Hungarians. So it's all about Siberia actually, and Siberian ancestry. So most probably we are all from the Siberian root, which goes back thousands of years, and sometime later we came together again and mixed together again. And of course, as the book mentioned before, there were 108 noble families which were Hungarian. Another thing that the book mentions is the belief system of the Hungarians. So one tribe, the Turtle tribe, accepted Christianity, and the other tribes, they were still resisting in accepting that religion. They wanted to continue with their shamanistic rituals and beliefs and the Tengrist belief system. So these were some of the peaceful connections with the Germans. But there were also some other disputes about land, because Hungarian rulers and also German rulers were killed. Hungarians started to give land to the Germans because they didn't want their leaders to get killed. And so forth, this gave way to more and more land be given to the Germans. In this way, the Germans mixed with the Hungarians, and they took over their land and became Hungarians, German-rooted Hungarians. Not only the nobles and non-nobles of German families came to Hungary, it was also the French who came and settled down. And of course, it was prosperous land. And this is actually now happening in Turkey. When you compare, we have prosperous land, and there are lots of Brits, lots of Germans, lots of Arabs, Syrians now living in the coasts, and lots of Kurds living in the coasts of Turkey now. So the same is happening in Turkey, actually. I think this is actually a habit and a tradition, a common tradition of the same root. A sister, brother. Now, the family Szambocki, I think it is pronounced like that, also came to Hungary from France. I have a friend, a Hungarian friend. Her surname is Szambocki, and she told me that she had relatives in Turkey, in Istanbul. Now, that makes me think that her ancestry goes back to Turkey, France, Hungary. So we three have a common ancestry then. I mean, the family Szambocki. Most probably they went somewhere from the Caucasus to Europe, Germany, Europe, France, and from there to Hungary, and they settled down there, became Hungarian. Most probably this is why they have relatives in Turkey. Most probably, because this makes me think of blood brotherhood. So if we are all actually far related from somewhere 10,000 years ago, or maybe less than 10,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, if all Siberians are actually related to each other, of course, and the Caucasus. So because when you look at the steppe region, it goes until the Caucasus. So it must be all related, from Siberia to the Caucasus. One wide steppe region, all related to each other. Of course, that makes then sense that the Hungarians, the Germans, and the French are actually related in some way. And of course, the Turks, Hungarians. I mean, of course, not all French. I mean, the families that came into Hungary, the noble families, which I mentioned before, the names of the families. So several families who had Siberian ancestry, or Caucasus ancestry, or Turkic ancestry. Okay, now, the nobles of the Germans, of the French, have now settled in Hungary. So what will happen? All these nobles, non-nobles, the immigrants who have settled down in Hungary, of course, they will rebel against the king, the Hungarian ruler. So they wanted him to be brought down. So, and this was actually the decline of the noble Hungarians. And what did they want? They wanted more rights. They wanted more freedom. They wanted more privileges. And when you consider the Hungarian ruler, the Hungarian leader, king, he gave them land. And the more land he gave, the more they demanded. The more land he gave, the more freedom they demanded. So this reminds me of something. This reminds me of Turkey. So when you think of privileges, certain privileges you give to certain people who have actually integrated into your community and who have assimilated into your community, this is very dangerous for the future of your lands, of your country. So Hungary and Turkey have the same faith. They share the same faith. They are the same people. They have gone through the same pain, the same suffering. There's actually not much difference. The only difference is that they accepted Christianity and we accepted Islam. But if you have a look at the way how they became Christians and how they were actually isolated from the world, from Europe, it is the same with Turkey now. You are isolated from the world, and actually we haven't quite fit into the religion. We actually are Tengrists in roots. We share the same faith with the Hungarians. So there is not much difference. And even Christianity and Islam, they are not that different. They are two big religions. They have power and they have strength. So the Hungarians actually, they didn't quite fit in their religion, but later on, of course, they were assimilated into it, and now they got used to it. So it's the same with Turks. So actually the faith is the same. The roots are the same. So, in summary, we can say that in the end, Hungary and the land of Hungary, those times, and the land of the Scythians was actually invaded by non-Hungarians. The Poles came, Czechs came, the Slavs came, Germans, as I said, and the Pechenegs, Cumans. So all were in the Hungarian land. They all started to live in the Hungarian land. Yes. The book ends abruptly after having summarized 100 chapters, approximately. It seems as if there was a continuation of the book. I wish it had gone on, but I think there is no other second Gesta Hungarorum, the continuation of the book. So that was it. Thank you very much for listening. This was a very long lecture, about 1 hour and 40 minutes. And I hope I gave you a certain insight into the real history of the Scythians.